I was listening to some of your album, "Kill My Landlord," and the message, it's very explicit, about communist manifesto. We get all these questions all the time from folks saying, well, what should I read? What's the theory background I should have? And in a lot of ways, you really lay out. I don't want to say in like breadcrumbs because it's more forward than that. You're very explicit about kind of the methodology of how to achieve change in a way that I feel like is really inspiring. I think you make a good point that people feel lost and alienated because even if they have a sense that the world could and should be better, these broad concepts like revolution are sometimes difficult to pin down and are easy to parody by folks who think the whole thing is pie in the sky and ridiculous anyway. So I'm curious about you specifically. Could you back up a little and tell us a bit about your origin story and how you came to be a 15-year-old who was engaged in social movements so
Yeah.
in depth at such a young age?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the story I always tell is that when I was 14, first I was at a barbecue, um, and a youth organizer was like, hey, we do a bunch of stuff. We're going to come by your house and blah, 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 and I was like, when are you coming by? They said, oh, yeah, Saturday at noon. And I was like, yeah, sure, be there. And I totally planned to not be there, right? Because it sounded boring, right? It sounded like something I do not want to do. And and I forgot that they were coming, and so I was there, and the dude, I was 14. He showed up in front of my house with a van that was packed full of 14-year-old girls, and I was like, okay, I'll come. But really, he said, okay, do you want to go to the beach? And I was like, yeah, that sound, you want to go to the beach with the van full of girls. And so, I mean, you're 14, you're thinking about maybe music and definitely sex, right? Like that's what is on people's minds, like, or even just companionship, friendship
Sure.
stuff. So I got in the van, but in the 1.5 hour, and once I started getting in the van, he said, we're going to go to the beach, but first we're going to stop and support the Watsonville cannery workers strike. And I was like, okay. And on the way there, these obviously now women, these girls, and I say that because I know who they are, and but they were talking about things I had no idea about. Right? They had just current events that I knew were being talked about on the news that I just was always shutting off. I didn't feel like I could, understand it, but they were like not only talking about them but debating them, but at the same time talking about music and things like that, and they just seemed like they understood all of this. And what I know now is they understood all of this because they felt like there was something they could do about it. Like, you're a young teenager. Sometimes you feel like there's nothing that can be done. I don't want to know about that.
Yeah.
Whatever. All this noise is going to happen. People are going to be mad or excited about something, and it's going to change tomorrow. And no, but they had, because of being involved in this organization, had this idea that they could do something about it. And I went from, like, in the course of a few hours, from like, oh, wanting to hang out with them to wanting to be them, right? And wanting to understand what was going on and be able to just talk about these things. And because it seemed like there's a sense of there's a sense of understanding who you are when you understand those things. So that attracted me to that. Got involved in, we would go and support the Watsonville cannery workers strike. And this was not as involved in what I'd be as connected as what I would be involved in later, because this was just us passing out flyers and helping out and things like that. But uh, I was then invited to be part of the summer, the Delano and McFarland Summer Project, which was the organizing of the Anti-Racist Farm Workers Union. And with that, so by this time it was summertime and I had turned 15, and with that was the situation I just talked about. But we'd go there and we'd stay there for 2 months at a time. And every morning, like talking about 3 a.m, when the organizers who lived there and were going to going off to work in the fields, when they got up, they'd leave a list. Here are the things that this person has to do today. Here are the things that that person has to do today. And on your list might be organize the caravan route, right? Or it might be it might be organize, make the schedule for the rally that's going, because every day there's a rally, and that rally is on the back of a flatbed truck that pulls up to the field, and the organizers who've been working all day getting folks, trying to get folks excited about being in the union or joining the strike, they come out of the fields, and that rally has to be ready. So who's going to speak? What are they going to say? Do you know Spanish? Okay, here, what can you learn? All those sorts of things. And it might even be plays, because at that time, it was the 80s. So still the legend of Teatro Campesino, who had been around, a theater group that had been around during Cesar Chavez days. That was very much a part of things. So it might be, you got to write a play, right? I mean, by tonight, by noon, whatever, that lasts for 3 minutes and says this. And so a lot of bad plays, a lot of things like that. And so, it might, there was a lot of trial by fire, and, and then just also witnessing the meetings that they'd have, because they'd be having meetings with these towns weren't that big, right? Population 3,000 people, different things like that. Delano was big, McFarland, Wasco, all these places. And they'd be having these meetings where people were actually, like, just average everyday people, not only debating whether they should join the union and whether a strike would work, but is the strike, is that risk worth it for the chance of changing the whole system? So they weren't just talking about the direct needs. They were talking about that, but they were discussing, folks were thinking about their own life and their own power and ability to change things here and now in relationship to changing the world. And so that quickly, made me feel like I could be part of something that went on for that made me part of history. And so I joined, and that's
So I'm hearing some interesting parallels between your origin story and Barack Obama's, who famously
he also started by getting in some guy's van.
Remember was talking about his new book, right? I'm sorry, I'm being glib, obviously, but he said he started reading, he picked up Marx to impress a long-legged socialist in school.
The ethereal bisexual.
The ethereal bisexual. But, in all seriousness, I think that kind of experience is so detached from most American. I mean, to the extent that we had a more prosperous, labor class and more prosperous union environment in the 1970s, that's obviously been devastated since then. And I remember, I said this in a recent episode, that I really regret having not taken labor law in law school. As someone who thought of herself as like relatively socially conscious, it didn't even occur to me that having greater knowledge of that particular issue area was so fundamental to the broader progressive struggles that I would be interested in in later years. And one of the things about Sorry to Bother You, that was so interesting, was the centrality of that kind of organizing effort in the workplace that was really offered up as an important a plot point and as important a force for for driving the action in the film as the Keith Stanfield's character's individual genius and success and that kind of meritocracy story that is usually what you see in these kind of rags to riches tales, right? It was competing with this other story about how the entire workplace could achieve if they were able to unionize and band together. And I think a lot of people watching that movie probably saw a model for achievement and broader change that you frankly don't really ever see.